we begin with the incessant blackout and collapse of the national grid. Well, on Thursday, the national grid collapsed again, barely 24 hours after a committee set up by the federal government to end the frequent collapse submitted its report. It was the second of such collapse in the week and the 10th time in 2024. The incessant collapse of the national grid left the country without public power supply, with power generation and distribution companies taking huge financial hits, leaving customers frustrated. Meanwhile, the Minister of Power, Fadipe has ordered the immediate replacement of aged equipment as part of fresh moves to stop the incessant collapse of the national grid. Well, to help us take a look at the frequent collapse of the national grid and the attendant epileptic power supply in the country, we have joining us in the studio a power sector policy analyst, Fadipe. He's a former spokesman of the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, and CEO of Sage Consulting and Communication. Thank you so much, Bode, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, viewers.
Yeah, now very quickly to the business. How have you been coping yourself? I'm very sure you're not immune from the blackout because you are in the power sector.
Yes, no. Anyone who is a Nigerian today, and I'm sure even the presidency itself is affected by the constant grid failures that we have experienced. Before the most recent ones, we had counted up to 167 in the entire 10 years of the privatization, not to talk of the ones that have happened in October and November. So it's unfortunate that in spite of the 10 years of the privatization journey, we are experiencing more grid failures, much more than we had even before the privatization. It's unfortunate. Nobody is immune today again. The transmission network has been brought down to the level of distribution network that, little fuses, little rain here and there, what you call transient fault or earth fault as a result of maybe an intruder bridging the distribution line can take out an entire 11 kV feeder or 33 kV feeder. You are now having that kind of situation manifesting itself at such voltage level of 330. It's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate.
All right, so we had the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act, and then we also had the Electricity Act 2023 last year.
Yes.
Despite these reforms by the National Assembly, and even states are now being given powers to generate, Nigerians are asking, what's happening?
The laws are not an end on their own. They are just a means to an end. It's supposed to provide an opportunity to rehabilitate the lines. But between when the law was passed, particularly the 2023, between when it was passed and now, it's not enough to do the kind of rehabilitation that will bring about the stability that law currently envisage. Apart from the inadequacies of the law itself, let's even leave the inadequacies of the law. But the El Dorado that law envisages cannot be brought to be within the period it was signed into law and now. Because again, one fundamental problem with the current power sector is obsolescence. And that means that quite a number of the equipment being used, particularly at transmission level, they are supposed to have been scrapped by now. I remember several years ago when Batunaji was the Honorable Minister of Power.
Yeah.
He sacked a CEO because of an equipment that had been in Benin, or whether in Benin or in Makurdi, for as far back as 1964.
That was the days of ECN.
Maybe even ECN is even good.
Wow.
Something far beyond, maybe in the days of PW, the Public Works Department. So you can imagine that in our today's network, we are talking about obsolescence of equipment. That's not the only problem. We are still talking about poor maintenance culture at a voltage level where the cost is so high that if you lose any equipment, even an insulator at that level, not because I tolerate inefficiency or poor maintenance culture, at distribution level, you can still accommodate it because the cost is not so high. But at transmission level, you must not give room for any sharp practices or sloppiness in maintenance, because when it happens, it takes out almost the entire country, as we have been experiencing in the last few days or towards the end of October, and that we have experienced in the month of November. So if we still talk about obsolescence in our network, because the MD of TCN himself personally came out to say we have problem of obsolescence. I mean,
yeah, but the minister has said that with this committee report,
yes,
the government has 6 months to actually fix some of this obsolete transmission and distribution equipment.
I feel very sad. I feel very sad that the minister will say we have 6 months. Meaning, it means that we'll be in that situation for another 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, that's what people are saying. That doesn't mean that we'll have to be facing this up and down almost every now and then.
I would have expected, and I think we should give it to him, because I think I saw a bit of that when he newly came in. But I'm still also not comfortable with the pace. Because for somebody coming to the power sector, the first thing you need to do, I mean, from my own basic experience, I was in the distribution sector, and I met some managers who knew what they were doing. Some of the managers, when they take them to a new station, as a matter of fact, before they report in their office, I know of a particular person, but I will save his name. Before he reports in his office, he will go to the place where he has been posted to, do a tour of the entire network. Wow. He will take his notes, even though he doesn't know the road network. But because he has a driver and a car, they will just go anywhere they can see lines. Anywhere. People say that if you get lost, once you see a NEPA line in those days, just follow the NEPA line. It will take you to a place. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? So he uses that line as his GPS to go around, take notes, look at transformers. When he now comes to the office and reports fully, he will call his technical people, maybe the O&M engineer, operations and maintenance engineer, or the planning and protection engineer. Say, okay, tell me about the network. Not knowing that he had gone around the network. Yeah. So when they begin to tell him about the network, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later that he becomes familiar with the place and he knows the names, he will say, no, that information you gave me about that place is wrong. This is the current information. Maybe they tried. So I will expect that by now, we would have been so familiar with the entire transmission network that we know the problem area. And I'll tell you something. When we had that blackout that cut off the entire north, which is another big disgrace.
Yeah. Not only the north, even Bayelsa is said to be 3 months without power.
It took transmission up to about 4 days before they could locate where the problem was. Now, I concede to them that driving through the bush, getting Caterpillar to open the road and get there is a major problem. But technology would have spotted.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the reason why we are supposed to have SCADA?
Exactly.
Is this, that helps, with managing the national grid.
Because SCADA means acquisition of data. And it's a supervisor that acquires data, and you can use the data acquired to be able to read. It gives you signals of what is likely to happen.
And a specific location.
Technology cannot be as advanced as it is today, that we will not have equipment that can locate such things. I mean, in distribution, for instance, which I'm quite familiar with, there is an equipment there that can locate. They call it fault locating machine. When you connect it to a cable, it will tell you where the fault is on the cable, so that you don't have to dig the entire cable trench like Abuja that has a lot of underground network. You don't have to dig the entire cable trench before so you will not damage the road. It will tell you the exact approximately location, or exact point where it is, so that you can go there and fish out the problem, solve the problem there, return the cable back to the trench, and then close the line. But here, 4 days, and then for 10 days, the entire north, as big as that economy is, was shut out.
And of course, some people are actually saying that we really need to take a look at the TCN itself, because the excuses are becoming too much. Now, this was what the TCN has said, that this latest one caused on Sunday was by a sudden rise in frequency from 50.33 hertz to 51.44 hertz. What does that mean to the average Nigerian? Yeah.
But in terms of generation, it has to be at equilibrium, generation and consumption, because you don't store electricity. And if it goes too high, if it goes above the tolerable level from 51, 52, getting to 53, there's problem. Okay. The system is built to react so that it can protect itself and the human being. So, because if it does not react speedily, there can be fire outbreak.
Okay,
And
instantaneously.
pulling down something as large as Katampe, I mean, you know the facility in Katampe,
Yeah.
or the one at Apo, if you lose such facilities, you have lost almost the entire country. Replacing it is something else. I mean, in an economy that is going through this kind of stress.
Okay, so it's programmed to actually shut itself down.
It should be able to shut itself down when it is noticing that. Now, when it is going high like that, it means that some people are not taking load. And then when it is coming down, it means that some people are stretching it. So it must be at it must be at that 50 Hz. There is a tolerable limit of 49 points, 50.51. But when it is getting to 52, 53, it cannot take it at all. It will react as quickly as possible.
Well, many Nigerians wouldn't want to hear all of this. They just
I
want
agree.
light.
They just want light.
What exactly are the quick wins that the federal government should start considering?
Now, let me do a bit of historical analysis, or let me go back to history. About 2001, we had this kind of situation where the grid was failing so frequently. It was failing so frequently that somebody almost lost his job. I mean, I spoke with that officer and he said, look, the Minister of State called me and said, if this grid does not stay, consider yourself fired. Has somebody's job been threatened? Because this is I'm not an apostle of military regime, but you and I know that if it were to be a military regime, by today somebody would have lost his job.
Well, the politicians are tolerant of each other because of so many attachments.
Yes, let's go back to where I was coming from. So the officer left Abuja and went to NCC, which is the National Control Center, and they began to bifurcate. They began to break the country into different sections and say, okay, let's begin to do load shedding at that level, because load shedding at that level is not a normal thing. But if it has come to that, then we need to do it. So they began to bifurcate the country, cut it into bits and pieces and say, okay, let's give power to the northern part for 8 hours or 16 hours. Let's move it to the east. Let's move it to the west. Let's move it to the central, until we are able to now stabilize and then begin to tie back again. Part of the problem that we are facing is this grid system, which is coming from our background of centralization of governance.
Yes, I mean, just like during the military
Exactly.
system. But now the Minister of Power is suggesting that we should have different off-grid solutions and that different states should begin to think of how to have their own mini grids and all of that. That doesn't necessarily have to depend on the national grid. How achievable is that? I've seen Lagos also saying that, look, they want to start rolling out.
Lagos has done an ROFP.
Yes, they are saying that, I mean, they want to start segregating their own power system, people who can generate power in different areas,
Yes.
and then it's only in Lagos. How soon can we achieve something like that?
It's not going to be very quick, because power industry investment is not off the shelf. I mean, you don't just go to cash and carry and then pick your groceries. That's not power industry. It requires a bit of time. It's time taking. Let's just put it that way. It's time taking. So if Lagos State is politically strong enough to push, it may take the next governor. I think Sanwo-Olu is in his second term now.
Yes.
It may take the administration of the next governor before they can begin to see the benefits of such move. And it requires consistency. It requires a lot of capital. The same thing at the federal level. If the minister is pushing that kind of thing, unfortunately, we have too many excuses. I just read in the media today that one of the reasons that is giving rise to this grid failure that we are having is as a result of switch to solar solution.
Oh, interesting.
I would have thought that it should be a positive development.
Yeah, I mean, for solar to be added into...
because there will now be more power that these distributions as off-takers can bring to the doorstep of end users, and end users can consume. This is the time that end users should even enjoy, because cost of petrol has gone up. How many people, I mean, even at better pass my neighbor, 3 or 6 liters. You won't do less than 6,000. And it won't take, at best, it will take you overnight. But it will not take everything in your house. So this is the time that we see that electricity has become so cheap that people should switch over to it. But it is unfortunate that it is just at that same time that we are having this kind of extreme epileptic performance of the sector. It's unfortunate.
Well, as we try to custom in this conversation, I want to talk about the effectiveness of the Electricity Act 2023 that was signed by President Tinubu. I've seen some state governments taking advantage of this, like Enugu now. I think they have their own Enugu State Electricity Regulatory Commission, and they've handed over the EEDC to one main power electricity distribution limited. Now, how do we ensure that people begin to think out of the box, the states especially, because they have the capacity to stay off the grid and look for solutions that will be tailor-made for their own population?
I think alongside Enugu, I think we must also give to Ekiti State. I know that Professor Bolaji Aluko, the son of the late economist,
renowned economist,
exactly, is involved in it, and occasionally I have opportunity to interact with him. I also know of the fact that Oyo State is taking a giant step, just as we have mentioned the issue of Lagos State. So the Electricity Act gives a lot of opportunity. I know that Obaseki, outgoing governor of Edo State, had also taken some giant steps.
Well, there's that Azura and all of that.
Well, Azura is even generating into the national grid. But again, we must give it to Azura as well. Azura is one of the best GenCom that is in the sector today. So if all of those states can can continue with what they have done, they have taken the bull by the horn. I know that financial issues will play a major role, but that the fact that they have the political will to even dip their leg into the electricity waters, even if it's going to be hot later on, but at least they have taken steps. So for me, they are doing well. Let other states emulate. So to the extent of the efficacy of the Electricity Act, we must give it to the, until we test the Electricity Act, we won't know the shortcomings, and we won't know the areas where we need to do amendments so that we can make progress. It's taking us too long.
But if you had a chance to meet with President Bola Tinubu at the moment, face to face, what will you tell him? Because it looks like the government is suffering a huge embarrassment.
With profound respect to him, I will ask him to please be more serious with the power sector.
All right. Well, I just hope the president will be listening, because it's time for governance, and many Nigerians are actually counting on the government to face serious governance issues like this persistent power blackout that leaves the country in a black hole. And many people keep hitting the government badly. We must thank you so much. But Fadipe is the CEO of CH Consultants and Communications, and of course he's also a former spokesman of one of the distribution companies.